Hi, I'm William Spaniel. Let's learn about international relations. Today's topic is going to be proximate versus underlying causes. The big question for this video is, what exactly does it mean for X to cause Y? And we'll see that there are two different types of explanations we can focus on, or two different types of causation. We can look at proximate causes, or we can look at underlying causes. And we'll see that proximate causes aren't really that helpful, and underlying causes are really helpful. And so we're going to be trying to focus on underlying causes as we move forward. Now, to see what these two types of explanations are, let's look at a couple of definitional type of things here. So first, the proximate cause, or a proximate cause, answers the question, why did this happen the way it happened? So it's very particular, it's very specific. In contrast, an underlying cause answers the question, why was this asking to happen? So it's looking for more of a general thing. It might not have answered the question, why did this happen right now? But it's asking the question, or it's answering the question, why was it going to happen this week, in contrast? We can see that we value these underlying causes more for good reasons. It's because proximate causes give us silly policy recommendations, whereas underlying causes tell us how to actually try to fix things. And we're going to look at 4 examples specifically here, 2 of which will be trivial and 2 of which will be related to international relations. And we'll see why these underlying causes are just so much better than these proximate causes. So first, let's look at an example of a dead driver. Suppose we saw a dead driver, he was driving, and he suddenly died. A proximate cause for that might be because the driver died because he flew through the front windshield of his vehicle. He got into an accident, he was ejected out of the front of the windshield, and boom, he's dead. An underlying cause, on the other hand, might be that the driver died because he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. Now, both of these causes are true. They just look at different sorts of explanations here. If the driver had been wearing his seatbelt, he would not have died. He would not have flown through the windshield. He would not have died. So that is true. The cause of his death was the fact that he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. It's also true, though, that he died because he flew through the windshield. Had he not flown through the windshield, he wouldn't have died. Also, had he not been into an accident, he wouldn't have died. So all of these things caused his death. But if we focus on proximate causes, well, what is that actually telling us? It's telling us don't fly through the windshield of your vehicle and don't get into car accidents. Well, obviously, no kidding, really? I mean, we know these things ahead of time. We know that one should not fly through one's windshield and one should not get into car accidents. Those types of things are sort of unavoidable. And we live our lives driving on the road because we know while there is some chance that we might go flying through a windshield, those odds are low and it's worth the risk to travel by car from point A to point B. On the other hand, the underlying cause tells us something much more important. We actually learned something valuable here, and that's just to wear your damn seatbelt. If you wear your seatbelt, you're going to be fine if you get into this car accident. The car accident's unavoidable, but you can control wearing your seatbelt, and so you should be wearing your seatbelt so you avoid getting ejected out of your front seat. Let's turn to another example here. Let's look at the bad softball team, and I bring this up because I play on a very bad softball team. A proximate cause for why we lose is we lose because we have a hard time fielding the ball. An underlying cause for why we lose is that we play in a beer league and we're always drunk. Now, if we look at the proximate cause to explain why we're losing here, we're going to learn that we shouldn't let a ground ball get by us, but we knew that already, and it's just we can't control that. We're not very good at softball, and so those ground balls are getting by us, and it's out of our control, except we could kind of control it a little bit better because if we look at the underlying cause, one knows that one should not play any sort of sport drunk, including baseball, and one should basically not drink and dive for balls. It's going to make you a lot worse at that. So you can see why we think that these underlying causes really get sort of at the heart of the situation, whereas the proximate causes are sort of looking at superficial explanations. And if we apply this to World War I and World War II, you'll really see why we value these underlying causes more than these proximate causes. So a proximate cause for World War I is that Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. If you don't know who Franz Ferdinand is, I'm not talking about the band. I'm talking about this guy right here with this funny mustache. And he was Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That was his official title. He was the heir apparent to the Austrian-Hungarian throne back in the day when Austria-Hungary was one country. And he was assassinated. A couple of weeks later, we're knee-deep in World War I. The underlying cause for World War I is that military technology gave states a huge first strike advantage, or at least that's what military leaders thought. And so some leaders were fighting wars against other leaders because they thought that the other leaders would be fighting a war against them, and they wanted to get the first strike advantage. They wanted to attack first, and so they sent their guys out to attack before the other guy could attack. But everyone was doing that, and so everyone just devolved into a war really quickly. Now, if we look at the proximate cause to help us stop future world wars from happening, well, the proximate cause is just going to tell us that we shouldn't let men with funny mustaches be assassinated. But that doesn't really tell us much of anything, now does it? On the other hand, the underlying cause tells us that first strike advantages cause war, and so if we want to avoid wars from happening, then we should emphasize defensive weaponry. We should develop defensive weapons and not offensive weapons. On the other side of things, let's talk about World War II here. Proximate cause for World War II is that Hitler was a bad person and he did evil things and wanted to take over the world, and so hey, we got into a world war over it. An underlying explanation is a little bit more complicated, but after World War I, Germany had to pay war reparations to the victors, basically France and Great Britain, for being, quote, responsible, end quote, for the war. Now, these reparations absolutely bankrupted Germany, and this economic chaos caused domestic institutions to fail, essentially for democracy to fail, which in turn led to Hitler coming to power. Had those domestic institutions not failed, Hitler probably never would have made it into power. If we look at the proximate cause, how do we solve this proximate cause? Well, we just let all aspiring Austrian artists into art school. That way Hitler never comes to power, he's too busy being an artist, and we don't ever have to worry about him. On the other hand, if we look at the underlying cause would tell us that we should be magnanimous in victory. And so this is actually applied by the United States after World War II. You can see that when we won World War II in Germany, we didn't punish West Germany for starting the war. We instead funneled lots and lots of money into Germany, or into West Germany. And also in Japan, after dropping a couple nuclear weapons, after we won the war, we played nice. We did not continue dropping more nuclear weapons on them. We made peace, and we started funneling money over there. And I guess it's now been 70 years, but 70 years later, we are still at peace with Germany and Japan. And in fact, Germany and Japan are among our closest allies. And so this underlying cause really gives us good, sensible policy advice, whereas this proximate cause doesn't really tell us much of anything other than, well, we should let Hitler into art school and just avoid him personally coming to power. But that doesn't really say anything about what would have happened had Hitler not been there. Maybe some other bad guy would have taken over the place instead. And in fact, there's a Twilight Zone episode about this that you might want to look into if you're interested in learning more about that. But nevertheless, that takes care of those examples. The lesson overall is that proximate causes are basically funny, but discovering underlying causes allows us to connect dissimilar situations and make sensible recommendations about today's world. If we're going to make policy recommendations, we need to base it off of underlying causes, not proximate causes. The issue, though, is that the process of discovering these underlying causes is really difficult. If it were easy, then we wouldn't have a discipline and you wouldn't see any of these sort of social science majors in your colleges. They just wouldn't exist because they wouldn't be necessary because everything was so obvious. As it turns out, things are much more difficult than what it might appear to be. And so what we're going to be doing in the next video is essentially coming up with a plan of attack to discover these underlying causes. And that next video will wrap up this section on introducing international relations, and then we'll actually be able to apply this plan of action that we're going to develop in the next video, in the video after that. So I hope you join me next video where we talk about the plan of action, and I will see you then. And until then, take care and bye-bye.